What you can see on the left side of this slide is how we identify what the learning outcome needs are for different grades. It starts in kindergarten, where it's mostly about consuming content, but all the way up to high school at the top, where it's about complex thinking and creation of new material. Not all devices are capable of doing that, and a really good device for a kindergarten student, a very young student, is not a good device for a high school student. We really want to work with you to offer a portfolio of devices which is optimized for these different grades. And that means that we're not just looking at devices which are the cheapest clamshell laptop devices, but all the way up to much more capable and rich 2-in-1 convertibles or ultra-thin with much better performance than some of the others. What you can see at the bottom of this slide is that Microsoft is not just about the operating system. We are doing many things more, like making sure that we can do proper management of these devices through, for instance, Autopilot and Intune. We have software which enables collaboration, such as what we're using right now, Teams, but also in Office. We have our Edge browser, which always includes the immersive reader, which is targeted towards accessibility, making accessibility for students better. And I will get back to that topic later in the presentation. And on top of that, we have additional software such as Minecraft, such as Flipgrid, and our learning and additional accessibility tools. We have a wide range of software which we want to make sure always runs well on your devices, because that is what is necessary to be able to target all these different grades in a proper way. So again, it's not just about the cheapest device, and it's not just about Windows. However, you have probably seen on November 9th that we have introduced a new flavor of the operating system, a new edition, Windows 11 SE. I want to cover that operating system because you may be getting in touch with that or get questions about that. This operating system was developed by us as a cloud-first experience. And that's very important, a cloud-first experience. And it is also developed to be able to run well on entry-level devices. The simple reason for that is that schools and governments came to us and told us that they need to buy many more devices, because all of a sudden devices can no longer be shared in the classroom, but every student needed to take the device home. So they didn't increase the budget for schools all of a sudden, but the demand for devices increased dramatically. And therefore they were looking at lower cost devices. So we needed to make sure that Windows runs well on these lower cost devices. What we have done in the operating system is optimize it specifically for education. We have designed it for a one-to-one deployment. It is impossible to take Windows 11 SE and upgrade an existing device. This only is available on new devices. So it's for a one-to-one deployment. We have made sure that the schools have full control over the image, what shows up on the taskbar, what shows up in the start menu, which applications are loaded and which applications cannot be loaded. A student cannot themselves install applications. Therefore, Windows 11 SE is not an operating system which is targeted towards retail environments. Users cannot install applications. The only ones who can do that is the school management, and they do that through Intune. That means that Windows 11 SE devices must use Azure Active Directory, AAD, and must use Intune to install those applications. That may sound as a limitation, but schools really ask for this. because they want to be in control of what students put on their devices. Because if something goes wrong in the classroom, that is a huge distraction and just a loss of learning time. And thus, it will diminish the learning outcomes. And as I said, that is our number one goal. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, we made sure that we optimized it so that the operating system and the applications work well on devices starting with 464 gigabyte memory and storage. It works well on small core Celeron or AMD or Qualcomm, AMD and Intel silicon. So we did a lot of changes. However, I also want to pull up this slide because you can see Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 11 SE next to each other. We have chosen in the startup phase for Windows 11 SE to start that with a limited set of partners because the far majority of sales in the 2022 timeframe will still be Windows 11 Pro for education. Because schools who can benefit from Windows 11 SE must have AAD and must have Intune. So it's for a limited set of schools. And we wanted to make sure that we knew exactly what problems we're going to be running into that we need to solve before we scale out Windows 11 SE. Once we start expanding Windows 11 SE, we of course will make sure that we get back in touch with you to ensure that you can be part of that program. But at the moment, Windows 11 Pro for Education is the number one operating system targeted towards education. And to be clear, there is no cost difference really if you use Windows 11 Pro for Education using the Shape the Future program for big, larger tenders versus the cost of Windows 11 SE. So there's no cost disadvantage for the customer choosing Windows 11 Pro for Education over Windows 11 SE. And again, once we have understood perfectly what it takes to scale out and to include many more partners, we will of course come back to you. This is a slide which some of you may have seen before. We go out every year to education customers and ask them in a research we call the CARE research about what they think is important in their devices for education. What you see on this slide is not a Microsoft opinion. This is what customers are telling us directly, either through contact through our sales forces or in the research which we do with thousands of people in different countries. This is what customers are telling us they find important in education devices. And therefore, we are using this slide to advocate to you to include that in your own devices. I colored 4 of these boxes blue because those are the boxes which we have focused on so far. We knew that devices in education are sometimes not handled very carefully. Those of you who have kids, and I have kids myself, you know that sometimes kids are not careful, even if you tell them that the equipment which they're using is not cheap. We need to make sure that those devices just keep working. And that's why we are recommending to build devices which can withstand a 1 meter drop according to the military standard 810G, which is now being succeeded by the 810H standard. Many devices which we have seen in the market already do this. Some devices even exceed the 1 meter. But we believe that 1 meter is enough because a standard desk height is 76 centimeters. So 1 meter is already beyond what is necessary if a device falls from a desk. But it happens, and it happens a lot. The other thing which is below that in the blue box is about the battery life. You can imagine that it is impossible to run extension cords to students' desks when they sit in the classroom. And today they may be sitting at home, but in the future, of course, classrooms will start opening up again. Somebody took control of the presentation.
Hello, Wilson. Can you leave the control to Oscar?
I'm sorry about that. I'm going to try to share the content back.
Okay, Oscar, I can still pick a point. You can.
Okay, let me go back to the slide. Sorry about that, everybody. This is where we were. Can you see it, Leon?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, good. So I was speaking about the battery life because it is impossible to run extension cords to every student's desk. And as I said, they will go back to the school class, so this will happen again. Therefore, the teachers are asking for a battery life which is 10 internet. You cannot just pick up the phone and call the help desk to come in and solve the problem. You, the teacher, need to solve the problem yourselves. If another student runs out of battery life, you need to figure out how to get a different device to that student, because otherwise he or she is not going to just sit still in class. They're going to disrupt the class. And therefore, what we're asking for is to use a very simple LED on the back of the screen, which is facing the teacher, which will tell the teacher this device will not have enough battery life to last the full hour, or the device is no longer connected to the internet. So the teacher can actually take action before the issue becomes a real problem. And therefore we call these things good to go indicators. But don't overthink this. This is just a simple LED which is facing the teacher. We do not want to ask you to add tremendous cost to the device, because as I just said, cost for teachers in schools at the moment is very important. The last one on this slide, which I'd like to cover, is the image load. Teachers are asking us that they want to make sure that if the student needs to restart the device, that it goes quickly, because any time that they need to wait is taken off the time that they can use to teach. We know it is possible, even with entry-level CPUs, to start the machine up in 6 seconds or less. However, you need to be very careful with the software which you load on your device. So we're asking you to do the testing using your actual image to make sure that if the device needs to be resumed, it can be done really quickly, and the teacher can get going with the class very quickly. As I said in the beginning, we are super happy with the responses which we're getting from you based on this research. And what I put on this slide, and I took the names out, but we looked at the available portfolios from many different partners right now, and already you can see that many devices are available which are colored already green. We still have areas where we can improve, but many areas are already green. So again, thank you very much for all the effort and all the innovation and all the engineering which you do to answer basically questions from our education customers. We will make sure that we do our work to make sure our LDP partners, our smaller OEM partners and larger OEM partners are fully aware of what you have to offer. Because we think that, as I said, this is answering questions they are getting directly from customers. Thank you very much. slide now about what is going to happen beyond the 2022 timeframe. This is a slide which we developed together with Intel. Intel, of course, is a very important partner for us in the education space. And today, you may be using Gemini Lake or Gemini Lake Refresh CPUs from them in your education devices. In the 2022 timeframe, we will see the Jasper Lake silicon become much more popular, as you can see on the bottom of this slide. They have two versions available, a dual-core and a quad-core CPU. And the quad-core is available as a Celeron or as a Pentium. At the end of 2022, they will introduce a new platform by the name of Alder Lake N. So there's an Alder Lake U, but there's also an Alder Lake N. And what you can see in this slide, in that bar, is that they have added two additional platforms on the Alder Lake. One all the way on the left side is 7 watts, and one on the right side is 15 watts. This will be a huge advantage for you because the 6 watt, the 7 watt, and the 15 watt can all be used on the exact same PCBA with the exact same firmware and the exact same set of Intel drivers. No difference. Of course, if you use the 15 watt, you will need to ensure better cooling than when you use the 6 watt. But the board itself can stay exactly the same. And that is important because, as I said in the beginning, we are not just looking at promoting devices which are the lowest possible cost, maybe a dual-core Celeron, but we also want to promote devices which are coming from you, for instance, which are using the Alder Lake N 15 watt, which is much better performance, but also, of course, a different pricing, which should be much more profitable for you. We really want to promote the full spectrum of devices and not just push it down towards the entry-level devices. So this is an important change coming from Intel side. If you have more questions about this, please let me know, then I will make sure that Intel representatives will be in touch with you about this. This is the same slide, almost the same slide as what I showed before. And this is speaking more about what we are hoping for in the 2023 timeframe, but that will also be important for 2024 and even 2025. You can see 4 different boxes being colored blue now, because those are new focus areas. And on the next slide, I will explain a little bit more about that. You will also see a green box and an orange or red box. Those were not available yet in the earlier step. So we have added those, and I will also speak about those. The blue areas, which are the focus areas which we want to achieve more and further improvements, are real-time collaboration, the use of Wi-Fi in congested environments, the ability to clean and disinfect the device, and to make sure that the keyboard cannot be damaged. So start with the first one. As I said, we believe, and schools believe, that remote learning is here to stay. It may not be the whole week, but there will be times that students will continue to learn from home. To do that, we need devices where the microphone is a good enough quality and the video camera is a good enough quality. Because in the past, to be honest, it didn't matter so much what the quality of the microphone and the video camera was, because they were not used a lot. Today, the microphone and the video cameras are used every single day. And we need to make sure that those devices are really good in video and audio conferencing when they use them every single day. So we are asking you to pay more attention to the components which you use to enable this very important scenario today, but also tomorrow. Related to that is the use of Wi-Fi technology. So far, we have focused mostly on 802.11ac, Wi-Fi 5. We are seeing Wi-Fi 6 and 6E coming to market as well, 802.11ax. The reason why we are very positive about these technologies is because that's not very useful. So we are asking you to make sure that you add a little bit of plastic so it's impossible for students to remove the keycaps. What we're adding to that is we ask for you to look into plastic which is antibacterial. So actually it is very difficult for the machine to host bacteria, and it becomes much easier to clean these devices. That plastic does exist, but it does require us to do research in what the availability is, and also, of course, what the cost of that is. Because some of the technologies which I'm mentioning on this slide, of course, they're not free. But as I said, we're not only interested to promote the entry-level type of devices, but also devices where you're adding new innovations to create better machines. These are the 4 focus areas where we think we can make further improvements possible. Two areas more. So these were the blue areas. Now I'm going to be talking about the red and the green area, about accessibility and about sustainability. Those are new areas which we are suggesting. Accessibility. Accessibility for Microsoft is extremely important. We want to ensure that all students with disabilities or without disabilities can learn and will have better learning outcomes. And we know that sometimes it is simple things that we need to do to make the devices better. And I listed a few ideas on this slide, but this slide is not complete. I'm really asking you to think through this yourselves and come up with better ideas yourselves and add to this. The ideas which I've listed here are very basic, actually. Think about the device designs which you have today. We all try to make sure that the devices are thin and light. Sometimes I pick up a device and I try to open it with one hand, because there are people with disabilities who can only use one hand. And to be honest, it's often impossible to open the device. So it looks beautiful, but I can't use it if I cannot open the device with both hands. So we need to think about ways how to do that. That doesn't need to be very difficult. Sometimes it is about adding a little lip on the side so you can open it up much easier. But we do need to think about that. Now imagine that you have students who are visually impaired. They cannot see well. How do they know what the buttons are for on-off or volume up or down? Because they're in different places all the time. We're asking you to add tactile indicators to these keys and buttons so that they can actually feel what the right button is to press or what the right port is to inject a USB port, etc. Again, very simple, quite low cost, but very impactful. The other thing which we heard directly from students and from customers ourselves is sometimes students accidentally disable, for instance, the touchpad because it is connected to one of the function keys on the touchpad. If you accidentally disable that touchpad, the student doesn't know that he did that or he or she did that, but she probably thinks that the device is now broken. And then she starts asking the teacher again, who cannot call up the help desk. He needs to solve it themselves. So what we're asking for is to make sure that students with disabilities or without disabilities cannot just accidentally disable things. We need to think smarter about how to do that. Number 4 is directly related to something which I mentioned before about using the audio for video conferencing and audio conferencing. But in this case, I'm asking also for exceptional microphone quality for people who have physical handicaps, who are visually impaired, who cannot use the keyboard that easily. Today, if you have a Windows machine, you can hit the Windows plus H button and start the included Windows recognition and dictation tool. The software is done. It's included already. You can actually talk to your computer and spell out complete emails in many different languages. But of course, that only works if the microphone is good enough quality to be able to do that. So we're asking you to pay attention to that. We also know that many OEMs are creating additional software which they load on their device. As I said, we are paying much attention to that in, for instance, Edge, our browser, and in Office and in Teams using the Immersive Reader. This is a service which we also offer to our OEM partners and our ODM partners to make sure that your own software is capable of doing text-to-speech, or you can use voice to control your software. And that link which I'm showing up on the screen here, aka.ms/immersive reader, will tell you all about that. You can make your own software very accessible to people who need to use voice to interact with the software. And number 6 is a very simple thing, but very important. If people are colorblind, it is sometimes very difficult to read the text in different menus. It's quite simple, actually, to test if your software is correctly designed for people who are colorblind, which, to be honest, are many people are colorblind. And you can go on the internet and find free tests to be able to do that. We're asking you in the future to, if you do design your software, that it doesn't only look good, but it actually looks good for all people, including people who are colorblind. This is the second new area which I'm suggesting, which is about sustainability. And there it is about recycling, repairing, reusing, reducing, or removing. We're asking you to look at the device design so that recycling after the end of the life is easier. In the past, we had devices where you can easily remove the battery because they were replaceable. Today, of course, the batteries are soldered onto the motherboard or part of the motherboard. We're asking you to look at the design and try to keep it as simple as possible to isolate certain parts, like the battery or like the LCD screen, so that if the device is at the end of its life, it is actually easier to take those parts out and recycle those or destroy those separately. We're not asking you to completely redesign the outside of the machine, but internally look at the different components and look at how you place them to make it possible and easier to recycle them at the end of the life. That will immediately impact number 2, because we're also asking you to make it possible for local students or local resellers to be able to repair the device without having to send it back, which means they can use standard parts or spare parts which are being made available to you, for instance the battery, and replace those locally so they can quickly repair devices and don't have to send it back and forth between your own factories and the schools. Number 3 is a relatively simple one. We have already all started using USB 3 Type C AC adapters. If you do that, it is now actually possible, of course, to reuse the AC adapters. And we have already seen that happening in the phone space, where new phones are being sold without AC adapter. That, I think, is also something which will come to computers. At some point, it will be possible to purchase computers, PCs, without the AC adapter included, because you already have one. That will save you cost and basically makes it possible for a school to purchase more devices because they don't have to purchase an AC adapter, which is just going to land up in a box somewhere because they already have one. Number 4 is about packaging material. We're asking you, if you ship your product in boxes, to make sure that you are not using material which cannot be recycled or reused. So plastic is a difficult one for that. This again is not a difficult thing to do, but it forces us to take a good look at how we package our devices into the boxes. Finally, the 5th bullet there is about removing devices. Imagine that a school is purchasing, let's say, 1,000 devices. They don't need 1,000 device manuals. They don't need 1,000 quick start guides. In fact, they probably only need one of each. What we're seeing today sometimes is that devices are sold and shipped just in the boxes as if they would go to an individual customer. You can actually save money if you can ship those devices into a bulk shipment way. Remove the items which are no longer necessary and reused, and just separate a few of them out to accompany the shipment. So again, some of the changes which we are suggesting on the sustainability here is actually beneficial to you from a cost point of view. But we are going to be paying much more attention to both accessibility and sustainability going forward. This is my last slide about next steps and asks. So we talked through the little slide which I show here on the left with the 4 areas where we're going to be paying more attention to, and the 2 new areas. So improved accessibility and sustainability for devices which are ruggedized, simple to clean and disinfect, which perform well in very busy Wi-Fi environment with great audio and video camera quality. That's the slide which is on the left. And hopefully we will then reach the slide which is on the right side with green boxes all around. What we then want to do is to make sure that we take the devices which you have available and speak to our OEM partners to make sure that they are fully aware of your devices and go back to you and connect to you to order these devices and add them to your own portfolios. So what I'd like to suggest is that you have listened now to me for a long time. Please think about this, and we, of course, we will make some material available to you. Think through this, review the plans which I suggested to you, and then we would like to set up a meeting with you to listen to your feedback, questions, and also what you are planning to do from your own device portfolio, so we can be fully aligned before, of course, it's 2023. So we have a little bit of time, but I come from the hardware business myself, and I know that in hardware, it just takes longer to make changes to existing device portfolios. So it will take time. But we'd love to work together with you to reach that slide on the right-hand side, all green. So with that, I'd like to say thank you again, and I look forward to work with you